Hi everyone, welcome back to Misinformation in Science and Society. Here to listen, not to judge. I'm your host Annie, and today with us we have Matthew Rosenquist, who is a CISO and a cybersecurity strategist.
Hello, Annie. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Doing fantastic.
Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Looking forward to a good conversation.
Yeah, of course. Could you please introduce yourself a little bit and what do you do?
Uh, my name is Matthew Rosenquist. I'm a CISO. I'm a cybersecurity strategist. I've been in the industry a little over 30 years now. I spent 24 of those at Intel Corporation, primarily as a cybersecurity strategist.
Mm-hmm. So why did you choose this career like initially?
I've got a passion for security. I actually started again more than 3 decades ago when security was essentially a dead end field.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the challenge. I like the ambiguity. I like the fact that you've got intelligent adversaries and it's all woven through technology and it's meaningful in our everyday lives.
Yeah. So is there like a specific part of what you do now that you like that's like your favorite? Like,
Well, there's so much chaos and ambiguity in our field. Every day is different. Every
mhm,
challenge is different. And that's part of the lure of the job. If you enjoy that, it's a great career. If you don't, this is definitely not the career for you. If you want stability and know what you're going to do every single day,
mhm,
this is not the career for you. So it's the variety of challenges. There's
mhm.
always something new. There's always something impossible.
Yeah. Um, why do you think truth is so important, and why do you think misinformation is such a big issue right now?
Wow, those are two big questions, right? So, the first one around truth, honesty, at its core, it's the foundations of all relationships. It is paramount for trust. And when we
Mhm,
look at our electronic and digital ecosystem, trust is really important, especially as technology begins to influence and control and shape our lives in everything that we do, whether it's the governments that we choose and operate, whether it's the infrastructure, whether it's the water coming out of your tap at
mhm,
home. All those things are now interwoven. And if there are malicious individuals out there that are impacting that, it has a huge impact. And again, more and more so, the more reliant and dependent we become on this technology
mhm,
in our everyday lives. Now, when we look at misinformation and disinformation, we have a problem because our society, right, modern society that's connected to this digital ecosystem, this is where we learn and gain our beliefs and provide our support, whether it's mentally, emotionally, financially. We look towards the, digital networks and social media and everything else to provide us insights and give us leadership cues on what we should believe and where we should go. And
mhm,
it started off very simple, right? It started off with advertisements. You should buy this product, you should eat this food, you should go to this destination. And that's fairly benign. That's something we expect, right? Especially in our type of economy. But when it gets to the point of, I'm going to shape what you believe in, I'm going to shape what government policy should be. And if it's based on truth and honesty and openness, that's great. It gives a democracy or a republic, right, or a representative democracy
uh,
the ability to self-govern very well. If, however, that's being manipulated
mhm,
and people are pushed to believe that things that are not true, that allows for the undermining of democracies, of freedom, and of liberty.
mhm,
Because if you can make people believe things, what you want them to believe, especially if they're not true, you can move mountains. And it's typically to the detriment of those people, to the people that are being lied to with misinformation and disinformation, and to the benefit of the very few who are controlling those narratives.
uh,
That is the danger. Technology is an incredible tool, and it can be used for equally incredible benefits or equally incredible harms
mhm,
when it comes to truth again, it's the foundation of everything that we experience.
Yeah. Um, so what do you think is like the worst type of misinformation or disinformation? Like about what?
Well, there's a difference between disinformation and misinformation. Disinformation is the creation of false information with the intent, right,
Mm-hmm.
of some malice to get somebody to believe a lie, right? It's a form of manipulation.
Uh,
Misinformation is either propagating disinformation without knowing it, or just sharing information and not having, or sharing incorrect information and not really having that malicious intent.
mm-hmm.
Both can be harmful at the end of the day, because if there is somebody that believes that information, they may act in ways that are not helpful to themselves or to society, or whatnot. And they may believe they're doing the right thing, and yet they've already been twisted and manipulated because of this. So
Mm-hmm.
the end result can be the same, but typically when you've got disinformation, there is a strategic purpose behind it. It is malicious. It is intended to victimize people and benefit others, very specific people or organizations or governments. Um, so it can be much more complex. It can be much more in depth, and therefore it can be much more successful. So we have to look at those threat actors that are potentially providing disinformation, creating it for their own purposes, or again, purposes of whatever their beliefs or their desires or their government or whatnot. And we have to worry about them a little bit more than simply those who are propagating false
Uh-huh.
statements or making up wildly crazy that most people will go, no, no,
Mm-hmm.
that isn't true. I'm sorry. The moon is not made of cheese. It's great that you're going to say that. I'm not too worried about that.
Uh-huh.
But if it's something, that is more designed in a strategic campaign to make people believe something,
Mm-hmm.
a person is good or a person is bad, or a government is good or bad, or a conflict is right or wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
All those kinds of things are fundamental in how we shape our future as a society on this planet. And
Mm-hmm.
that's big.
Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about cybersecurity and how that like relates to misinformation, disinformation, and stuff like that?
Yeah. So part of the role of cybersecurity is to make sure that digital assets are protected, but
Mm-hmm.
it's also to ensure, the privacy is being respected and there's a certain element of safety. Again, if you can take control of things, your autonomous car, if a bad person can take control of your autonomous car in a few years and drive you into a wall or oncoming traffic, right? There's health and safety issues.
Mm-hmm.
When we look at especially properties that already have maintained trust, let's say your favorite news station that's not very biased, and this is where you get your news, and where you form a lot of your belief structures.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody who is biased is able to go in there and compromise that, and maybe it's your favorite Wikipedia page or whatnot, and put their information in there, now they can reach out to that community by leveraging other organizations' trust that they've built up. And we see this, right? We see this in phishing attacks, or we see this with web page defacements. We see this with data harvesting that goes out, phishing scams and all of that. Again, it's a matter of leveraging what you know to gain a benefit out of it. And security plays a huge role in that, because if things aren't secured, also you don't have trust.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all woven together. We're part of this fabric in our digital ecosystem. There has to be truth, there has to be transparency, there has to be trust, there has to be security, there has to be respect and ethics
Yeah.
in order to make it work and benefit for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Um, so what do you think will be the best way, if there's like one way, to eliminate or avoid or reduce misinformation?
Well, there's a couple of different approaches, right? In a utopian world, each one of us would step forward with only good intentions,
Mm-hmm.
right? And put the greater good up there, with our own personal needs, wants, and desires. The
Uh-huh.
reality is that doesn't happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? At least it doesn't happen all the time. Most people think, okay, most of the time people are good natured. Okay, great. Um, but that probably isn't enough.
Mm,
So there are other mechanisms, checks and balances, where you can have, especially if there's transparency, you can have independent, trustworthy organizations or people fact check
mm-hmm,
and communicate that. Free press has shown throughout, the millennia to be able to provide the public with insights, right? Showing scandals, reporting things that most would want to keep concealed,
mm-hmm,
opening things up to make them transparent where there's some bad things going on. So we've got things like that that really help. Free press is another good one, in addition to driving and improving morals and values in ourselves and our next generations.
uh-huh,
We've got governments out there, and they work in certain, aspects of regulatory controls.
mm,
In the banking industry, you can't come out with a fake statement saying we made all this money when you really didn't, right? There are
mm,
certain controls. In healthcare, you can't come out with a report that says this cures all cancer when it really doesn't, right?
uh-huh,
So there's different aspects. Now, there's also certain aspects in privacy, and there may eventually be some in the ability to regulate or at least put some guardrails in place. And some governments have in their countries of what falsehoods, what disinformation or misinformation can be created and propagated.
mm-hmm,
Uh, and so again, but there's in doing so that potentially treads upon free speech, and that potentially treads upon that the other controls there. And so it is a very tough challenge to find a good solution that is sustainable over time. But one of the things that I actually recommended several years ago, because in our country we have a problem with misinformation and disinformation, and we see this in the political structures. We see this even in some of the business structures, and when we're talking about things going on around the world.
mm-hmm,
One of the recommendations that I had is making sure that when somebody is saying this is news, right, that it's actually factual.
mm,
It's one thing to have opinions, it's one thing to have entertainment, right? But right now we have a blending of that
mm,
entertainment and news,
yeah,
and the average person can't tell the difference. You
mm-hmm,
can't. When you have a news station that is has an entertainment section, and it's somebody out there, pounding their fist on the table and making things up,
uh-huh,
completely fictitious things that are getting eyeballs, that are sensational and great headlines, but they're doing it for their own good or for, whatever. That confuses the people. There was a time several generations ago where you had a news program, a news station, a news reporter, and they only reported the news, right?
mm,
Walter Cronkite, way before your generation, would come on at night and say, hey, here are the facts. I'm not passionate one way or another. Some of them are pleasant, some of them are unfortunate, but we're going to report the facts and let you make the decision.
mm,
Okay. We kind of got away from a lot of that because sensationalism gets you a lot more eyeballs. And
yeah,
that's, the financial incentives are now leaning towards doing those kinds of things
mm-hmm,
versus rewarding organizations that are just trying to tell the news, trying to inform people so that they can make good decisions for themselves, their community, their country, and their world. If I were to foresee a good set of regulations coming out, it would be delineating those to say, if you're a news company, you're going to be held accountable to what you say, and what you say needs to be accurate,
mm,
right? If you want to be in entertainment, great, be entertainment, right? Don't stop doing that. But you can't use the moniker news or truth. You can't use that because it'll confuse people. So
yeah,
if you're logging into a news site, the information is factual. Whereas if you're going anywhere else, it could be fiction, it could be narrative, it could be semi-truthful, semi-not. Let them fight, but don't, impugn upon those organizations that really want to tell the truth.
mm-hmm,
Um, and if we can get back to that point to where you can have sources that are going to tell the truth, and if not, they're going to get regulated, they're going to get put out of business, they're going to get fined, go to jail, whatever. And that's where you're going to get your truth in the news. And then everything else is entertainment, because you do want to hear opinions. You do want to hear salacious things. Great. But in our minds, we need to be able to separate those things so we can make good decisions on one and be entertained by the other.
Mm-hmm.
We may need to move down a path where there are certain regulatory controls that kind of mandate that to help us as we grow as a species to embrace this massive access of information, because our brains were never designed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And now we've got total access to things going on in all corners of the world. And anybody can create content. Maybe some rules are needed, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, so I think that's all my questions about misinformation. So just for fun, do you have a role model, either like professionally or like just in general?
Yeah, I mean, we all have things or ideas or people or concepts that we've looked up to for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, when it comes to truth, for example, I'll give you a controversial one. Somebody that I've looked up to when I'm a fan of military history and strategy. I'm a strategist, right? So
Mm-hmm.
understanding all that. So one of the controversial people in history that I've really liked was General Patton. Now,
Mm-hmm.
General Patton, again, he holds a special place in my heart. He wasn't all good by any means,
Uh-huh.
but he did have focus and purpose in what he wanted. And he understood how to deal with the adversaries that he was being faced with.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those adversaries were on the battlefield. Some of those adversaries were within his own organization, right? That didn't want certain things to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And in some respects, he was a little crazy as well in some of his personal beliefs, but okay, great. But from a strategist perspective, he understood how to lay out clear objectives, clear goals,
Mm-hmm.
to take his organization and through leadership, hone them into a really refined, in his case, fighting force, military force. He
Mm-hmm.
took arguably probably one of the worst disciplined armies in the United States. The United States had it at the beginning of World War II, and honed them into razors, into some of the most disciplined soldiers anywhere on the planet, and succeeded in achieving his goals in combat more so than anybody ever had, probably for millennia, dating back to Alexander the Great. Um, but again, he saw the potential in people. He saw where there were pitfalls and was able to navigate around them. He realized what goals he needed to go through, both using technology and process and the behaviors, weaving all that together to achieve success that nobody thought was even possible. It just simply wasn't fathomable until he did it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what strategic thinking is about. It's not about today's firefight. It's about, how do you win that long-term goal? How do you see it, understand it, and maneuver towards it? Right. And there's going to be sacrifices that you have to make, but
Uh,
how do you get there? And he was supreme at that. Supreme.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, so just to close this out, do you have any advice for people, especially like teens? Can be about like information or just
Yeah. Oh, I've got all sorts of advice. We could talk all day about advice.
Mhm.
For someone like yourself, somebody who is preparing to go and have their career, right, that part of their life. Technology is a huge thing. And again, it provides the tools to help us be better people, to help us understand and get to where we want to go, understand where we want to go faster as well. So, leverage those tools, understand where you want to be. And in many cases, it's just about exploring. But
Mhm.
even if it's exploring, you can use technology to explore faster, to cross out certain routes and certain things that you like or don't like.
Yeah.
If you don't like the sight of blood, okay, let's cross off the medical field for the most part. Maybe research and everything else, but you probably don't want to be hands-on. And
Uh-huh.
again, you have the experience to be able to use technology to understand what different jobs and roles are. The
Mm.
other thing that you have the ability to is very early on, just as you're doing right now, you're showcasing this. You're reaching out to experts in the field. You're engaging with them. Connect with them on LinkedIn or some other site, but understand, right, how those experts view the world. If you were wanted to be a CISO, right, like I'm a chief information security officer, you should
Mhm.
be following CISOs, right? Listening to what they say. What are the issues? And more importantly, understanding how they view them, how they see the problems and opportunities. And that helps you very early on, not only help building your own kind of brand and making connections in the industry,
Mhm.
but it helps you see the problems through the eyes of the experts, right? Who have been in the trenches, who have the scars,
Yeah.
see the problems through their eyes. It is better than it's essentially a master's class,
Mhm.
right? That you can start to embrace now. And there's nothing holding you back, right? You have access to all this information. You have access to resources, and there are people that will share ideas that you can pose questions to, that you can ask to do podcasts and interviews.
Mhm.
And they'll show up and they'll share. And again, they'll be honest, they'll be forthright. Here's the good, here's the bad. But use technology, understanding it can be horrible and harmful, but it can equally be incredibly beneficial. Use it for the benefits, understand and avoid those risks of being victimized by it at the same time.
Mhm. Yeah. So I think that will be all. Thank you so much for being here again. Um,
Absolutely. My pleasure. My pleasure.
yeah. All right. Have a great rest of your day.
Great. Let me know when you publish this. Shoot me a note and I
Yeah.
will share it out with my followers as well. I've got a few followers on LinkedIn, and so they may be interested in seeing it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
You got it. Have a great day.
Bye.